Welcome to Impact with AI. I'm Brandon Andrews, your host. Excited to start another conversation with an entrepreneur using artificial intelligence and machine learning technology to impact the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Today, I'm joined by David Jones, CEO of Lumena Energy from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. I'll be engaging with David in a conversation about United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. David, welcome to the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you and Lumena Energy creating an impact?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Brandon. So, number one, our ethos getting into the game was that we wanted to create what's called a virtual power plant, which is a fancy way of saying power on demand services across the entire world. So when I was a pilot prior to getting into the technological space, actually I was in Thailand and I met a child who was doing his homework in front of a 7-Eleven. And it struck me as odd because I said, well, here in America, you would never see anything like that. And I had a really engaging conversation with his parents and come to find out they don't know when their power would be on. So it would kind of hit them in spurts. And they just said, well, we have to use what resources are available. And 7-Eleven is open 24 hours a day. So that led me down the road of creating what's called decentralized energy resource materials. And so what we did with that is we first started off with an energy management system, which allowed us first to kind of act as like the traffic police, so to speak, for energy resources. And then we began to interconnect services together. So with a virtual power plant, what you're basically looking at are connecting energy generators and energy storage systems. And so, I mean, if you take solar panels that are placed on a person's residential home, or you take even like a Tesla, which is a fantastic source for battery storage, and you interconnect these things, and in the situations that occur, which are less common here in the United States, but more common in places that we typically operate, like sub-Saharan Africa, where we have something that's called load shedding. You have like rolling blackouts constantly. And so integrating a virtual power plant into their infrastructure allows us to create what's called demand response, which is basically like the arbitrary loading and offloading of energy to create capacity needs.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, David, I've always said that I think the best businesses, the best ideas come from real life lived experience. And so you meeting this child and then going the next step and actually engaging with their parents, asking, why is this happening? And then asking yourself, what could I do about it? That is the classic entrepreneur's journey. So kudos to you for what you've done. And I know you're having an impact around the world. Now, David, let's talk about UN Sustainable Development Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. Of course, having consistent power is important, but it also needs to be priced in a way that people can afford it. And of course, we're always thinking about the environmental impact when it comes to energy consumption, given the current array of energy options today. So as you think about SDG 7, how are you and Lumena Energy impacting it?
Well, first off, just to address the elephant in the room, global access to electricity is still lacking. So for more than 733 million people, they live in non-electrified zones around the world.
David, I didn't know that it was that large. I knew that a large portion of the population didn't have access, but wow, 733 million, and you're, of course, impacting that with the work that you're doing. Please continue.
Yeah, so I think that it's important to go into these areas. And just to give you an example, I will actually be a speaker at the United Nations COP16 summit next week, as a matter of fact. And what we'll be talking about are some of the initiatives that we have going within Colombia as a country and abroad. So first and foremost, one of the initiatives that we've created, and I believe you and I talked about this briefly before, but we're working on hybridizing vehicles. So usually large vehicles like ice cream trucks or RVs and so forth, things that have impactful energy storage capacities as well as energy generation capacities. What we're doing with that is we're setting up a platform that allows us to once again arbitrarily onload and offload energy. So
Mhm.
creating a mobile virtual power plant, it eliminates the requirements for, for having a dedicated space. So there's no need to buy land. These vehicles are constantly traveling around, so it allows them to park and usually go to like a Tesla supercharger and be able to do what's called a backfeed of energy. When you backfeed energy, that allows you to create a large volume of energy when it's required and therefore eliminate the energy crises that exist. Secondarily, we're also launching a system called Connect Volt, which allows us to convert storage containers into a large yield capacity for battery. Doing that, we would be able to basically load those into like hitch trailers as well as to have long-term options, which enable us to park them in, say, like a homeowners association or like a subdivision or even in like FEMA camps. And,
Mhm.
of course, there would be a solar array with that to allow for this energy to be replenished. So these are some of the initiatives that we're doing right now. We also have a renewable energy training school, and currently we have a class in session. And over the course of the next decade here in Illinois, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we have a decarbonization program that we hope to propagate throughout the world.
Wow. Well, David, it sounds like you and Lumina Energy are doing great work impacting SDG 7, but also, and perhaps more importantly, bringing that number down from 733 million people who don't have access to electricity to whatever the measurable or whatever the nominal number should be there. Thanks for the work that you're doing. Now, David, this is impact with a artificial intelligence or machine learning use cases are you applying to Lumina Energy, and how is it impacting the business?
Yeah, so in terms of artificial intelligence, every single initiative that we create with either the battery storage or generation, we use something that's called AIoT. So AIoT, or the artificial intelligence of things, is basically a type of sensor that allows us to monitor and to be able to control that. We call it a node. So we would be able to control that node to understand what the general feed is on like the kilowatts being generated, or like the amperage, the battery storage capacity, the overall health of the system. And what that allows us to do from a by volume scale is to create a living, breathing ecosystem. Subsequently, we also have what's called a decentralized autonomous organization setup, or a DAO for layman, which allows us to create like a standardized voting system. So for stakeholders that are a part of our network, that allows them, regardless if you're, for instance, at the governmental level, or you're a homeowner, or you're a regional transmission operator, to use artificial intelligence and also use the blockchain, by the way, to vote on specific things that are required to create a sustainable energy economy, such as like the pricing of energy, for instance. Like, it's not fair that there should be a monopoly held by the federal government. We believe that in democratizing, you're able to appeal to the local needs of both of stakeholders on each level. And so that's one of the things that we're doing. So with Parsec, our energy management system, we're able to basically control our energy asset portfolio around the world and to thin energy where it's needed most. And that also allows users to create peer-to-peer transactions where they can buy and sell energy from each other. We also have what's called a carbon credit marketplace that we'll be launching called Leaf Ledger. We use artificial intelligence. As a matter of fact, we just, with the help of the University of Chicago this past summer, created a linear regression model that allows us to track carbon credit pricing across the world. So we're able to do that autonomously. Those are just some of the initiatives. I could go on and on, but I know we're stretched for time.
David, this is so exciting. I love being able to see and hear, and in your case, probably feel and touch real life AI applications. We hear about the potential of artificial intelligence so much. We hear about what it could do in the future, what it might do. We hear about the investments that are being made. But here you've listed a range of concrete use cases that are being applied to your business today, and of course generating impact. I want to dig in a little bit on a couple of these. So first, when it comes to the energy management, because this is actually one area where I think a lot of people may have heard AI could potentially help with managing utilities, and in this case managing energy. How does that process actually work?
So, with the artificial intelligence of things, we use a type of sensor. We actually, and just for fun, we started off with using something called a Raspberry Pi. So,
Yeah.
the Raspberry Pi is actually it's integrated into what's called an inverter. And I hope I'm not using too much fancy terminology, but the inverter for an electrical system is basically a device that will convert energy from DC or direct current to AC. And so basically, when the energy comes from solar or wind or what have you, it has to be usable in a residential or commercial situation.
Mhm.
So when we install that sensor, it allows us to basically slave it and and it permits us to revert it back to its original state and send it back out into the grid. So in the instance of artificial intelligence, we do something that's called stochastic pricing and forecasting. With forecasting, we're able to see the needs of the system from a granular level all the way up to a macro level. And for instance, it's cold here now in Chicago because it's cold almost 7 months out of the year.
Yeah.
But specifically during the fall and going into the winter months, we know for a fact that people are going to be running their heaters more often than they would normally throughout the entire year. And naturally, with the summer months when they come, we also know that people will be running their air conditioners. We also know that when people are coming home from work, typically around 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. and so on, that every light's going to be switched on in the house, and that will decrease the threshold of energy that's available. So we can forecast that our AI models will actually tell us that these are the times throughout the calendar year that we need to push more energy back into the grid. And so these things all happen autonomously.
Got it. Got it. Well, it sounds like this energy management has a lot of positive potential, not only for what you're doing with Lumina Energy, but for the grid more generally as we think about some of these global energy problems and making sure people have access and again, making sure that it's affordable. And before we switch to the next topic, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your DAO. So, how do people join the DAO? Is this an investment opportunity? Is this based on people that are using your products and services? How do people join? And then from a voting standpoint, how does that process actually work?
Glad you asked. So we had a privatized DAO just for a pilot period a couple of years ago. And as a matter of fact, what we're doing right now is working on a decarbonization program, which I mentioned earlier, which I can now kind of delve into. This decarbonization program that we're launching in Illinois is called Greenovate, and the idea is to take sectored positions on things that affect sustainability, such as the usage of different outdated electrical appliances in the house, like people are still using gas stoves, for instance, to be able to switch those out, to get solar panels on residential properties and commercial properties where applicable, using geothermal and things like that. So in doing so, we have to establish working relationships and contracts using something called a power purchase agreement with municipalities.
Mhm.
So our business model has shifted drastically. We're now operate as a business to government model. So the DAO comes into place because those who are shareholders, such as people who are participators in the energy generation or the storage, like if you do have panels on your house or you turn like your warehouse into a battery storage depot, you would be able to commune with, for instance, the local power concern or politicians, anyone who basically has a vested interest. So this DAO will actually be launching next year, we believe around Q2. And the idea behind that is, like I said, to vote and to allow for peer-to-peer energy sharing, as well as to address certain issues where they can be mitigated quickly rather than having a long drawn out voting period. Typically, windows for the DAO could go between 24 to 72 hours. And as you know, you live in California, right?
No, I'm on the East Coast, but I mean, I'm on the West Coast enough to maybe
Yeah.
pretend.
Okay, so I mean, it's very common now to have virtual power plants in Los Angeles because of the energy strain and so forth. And unfortunately, the delegation that is required in order for any actual change to take place could easily take years.
Yeah,
We don't have years, especially now that we're beginning to wean ourselves. Uh, we're beginning to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. Having the ability to make concerted decisions as a group within a matter of 72 hours is it's infinitely powerful.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, like as I said, we're going kind of by a municipality by municipality basis here in Illinois, and once we've worked out the kinks, we will begin to propagate these Greenovate programmings across the entire United States and eventually the world. But if you are an Illinois resident, you will have that opportunity around Q2 to participate.
That sounds incredible. It sounds like it has a lot of positive potential, and we'll look forward to seeing the launch and maybe having you come back and talk about it as you go into the next year. Okay, David, now that we've talked a little bit about the impact you're making and how you are directly impacting United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 7, here's the big question that I'm asking everyone that joins the program. Do you think artificial intelligence can turbocharge sustainable development?
Well, technology is useful, but I don't think it'll ever be able to replace human innovation and socialization. The energy blockchain that we employ, it fosters a public ledger to track energy transactions and democratize energy sharing, but there's always going to be the need for the human element. And, sure, as I mentioned before, we literally are turbocharging the democratic process for our stakeholders with the DAO. And most certainly, we're able to do that with the forecasting of energy needs. So, in the instance of what we experience here in Illinois, I mean, we have a pretty stable grid, and across our entire regional transmission operator network, which is called MISO, which extends throughout 15 states in the Midwest. We don't really have those issues, but you do have pocket regions. I mean, there's even here on the south side of Chicago, there's still a lot of cases of rolling blackouts because their grids are usually located in impoverished areas, and there's no real incentive to fix them. So you do have those issues that occur. And once we actually roll out this system, I believe that this is going to bring us out of the dark ages as a collective. And providing a holistic model using artificial intelligence, especially in using the blockchain energy ledger that I spoke of, it'll allow for us to actually have a publicly auditable database. So you can see when those transactions take place. There's tons of malfeasance and kind of shenanigans happening here, as well as other states and other parts of the world that can easily be mitigated to know exactly where money is going, to automate certain transactions, as well as other steps that will lead us into a more transparent kind of marketplace, if you will.
Got it. Got it. Well, AI definitely has a lot of positive potential, but you're right. Without direction from a man in the loop, without direction from humanity, it could certainly go left, and that's not what we want. And of course, as we think about AI and what the future holds, there's no future, at least in the near term, that wouldn't require people to still interact, engage, direct, etc. with the technology. But David, thanks so much for joining us today for this episode of Impact with AI. How can people connect with you and Lumina Energy online or otherwise?
Sure. So at the request of my team, I've actually started building up my social media branding. I'm number one on Google search engine optimization. So if you type in David N. Jones, you'll find me immediately. You can also visit our website, luminaenergy.com. Drop us a line. I can also be reached at David at if you have any pressing matters, or if there's any type of engagement on any level that we can start working on. My team would be happy to put it all together.
Great. Well, David, I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest in what you and your team are building at Lumina Energy, especially because you're impacting this global issue and supporting UN Sustainable Development Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. Thanks everyone for joining us for another Impact with AI conversation. If you'd like to view more of these conversations, visit impactwithai.media. We'll see you next time.